Pamiętaj, czekaj, grać. Grünüsin. Kesin şeyden bırakın tünan dıştı da daraşı zaten var baktı vrında. Krishna. Om Gyanati Mirandasya Gnagna Shalakya Chakshurum Litaminatas Mai Shiguru Venmaham. Shичитанием Nobistam Stupitimen Butale Svaropakadama Ham Dadati Svapadantikam. Vandegam Shigur Shut Padakamalam Shigurun Vishnivam Scha Shirupam Sagajtam Sagna Ravnatam Vitam Sajivam Sdvatim Savdutam Purchina Hitam Kshnachitami Devam Shirada Krishna Padan Sahakanalita Shivishakan Vitam Scha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dina Bandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Korangi Radha Vrindavaneshwari Vrisha Panuste Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Panchaka Pataru Pichakri Pastu Bevacha Patidnam Pavanebhi Vaishnavebhi Namo Namaha Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shidvaita Gadadhara Shivasati Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Jai, the Gayatri book. Jai, His Holiness Sachinandana Swami. Jai, His Divine Grace, Abhai Naravinda Shila Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. So, this is now point 7 from chapter 8, the Kama Gayatri and spontaneous devotional service. Spontaneous loving devotional service to Krishna manifests when a devotee feels an irresistible attraction toward the devotional service performed by the eternal residents of Vrindavana. Such transcendental attraction is called raga, and the sadhana of a devotee following transcendental attraction is called Raga Nuga Bhakti. Raga Anuga, following one's transcendental raga. This level is attained when sadhakas have transcended their material conditioning and are free from all unwanted traits, anarthas. In his Mantrartha Deepika, Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakura analyzes the Kama Gayatri from the more confidential viewpoint of Raga Nuga Bhakti. First, he points out that the Kama Gayatri is a Maha mantra and that devotees who chant it as their regular sadhana will be born in Vrindavana. Second, he states that the mantra's worshipable deity, Ishtadeva, is Shri Krishna, the king of Madhurya Rasa, and the transcendental Cupid. Then he explains the mantra's words as follows. The syllable Klim expresses how the minds of Radha and the other gopis are captured by the sound of Krishna's flute. Kama Devaya stands for Radha and the other gopis being captured by Krishna's sweet pastimes. Kama has to be read in the sense of sambandha, relationship, and anuga, obedient following. This indicates that worship by chanting Kama Gayatri is performed in Kama Anuga or Raga Anuga Bhakti, Raganuga Bhakti. This makes sense if we consider that the effect of chanting the mantra is to illuminate and intensify the manifestation of one's innermost desire to serve Krishna in pure, spontaneous love. Another way to look on the word Kamadeva is Divyati Kaman. He shows his desires, or Kamena Divyati. By his desire alone, he plays in different pastimes. Krishna plays in different pastimes. How is Krishna Kamadeva? Because he is Pushpabana. He shoots 5 flower arrows from the 5-threaded Sharanga bow. Dimahi then means I meditate upon him as the possessor of these 5 arrows. In this way, Pushpa Banaya expresses how the lovely sweetness and other features of Krishna's qualities nourish the excitement for conjugal love in Radha and the other gopis. Krishna is present in Vraja as Ananga, the invisible, all-pervading Cupid, ever youthful and enchanting. He is the only object of worship of the Kama Bija and Kama Gayatri. It is his form only that attracts the worshipper. This transcendental form of Krishna has no equal among all the Lord's forms, and it is the embodiment of loving devotion in Madhurya Rasa. Tano Prachodayat means, may he inspire us, or reading it as Tano Prakashena Chodayat, Tano Prakarshena Chodayat, may he kindly please us, Chodayat, with his excellent superior qualities, Prakarshena, by engaging us in his loving devotional service. According to Prabodhananta Saraswati, the word Prachodayat can be read as Prakarshta Rupena Cha Udayat. May he appear Udayat in his full form. This form is described as possessing 24 and a half moons. When Krishna performs his celebrated Rasa dance, he is requesting his Yoga Maya potency to step to the side and simply watch us as he enters the stage of love as the supremely independent Kamadeva. This is a way for the Rakanuga Sadhaka to meditate on Kama Gayatri, as Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakura explains. So Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakura explains the following. When Yoga Maya is watching the Rasa dance, this is the form that Gayatri takes. She observes Krishna's pastimes. This Rasa Lila, the most celebrated of all the Lord's pastimes, is cherished in numerous confidential Vaishnava scriptures. You may enter more deeply into this sublime matter under the spiritual master's guidance by making yourself familiar with the Rasa Lila after having carefully assessed your own qualification and your ability to digest such highly confidential subjects. So the last citations were number 40 and 41 to chapter 8. So these were So citations 1441 are the following. Let us see. 41 is from Vasanta Panchami tape. Sivarama Swami tape ministry. Okay. And for the citation 40, It is written to look at page 260. 260. Let's see. Here are different prayers. Some prayers connected with manual for deity worship. It is written here an abbreviated manual for deity worship. Sankshepa Archana Padati. And there are different descriptions of prayers. And at some point one comes to the saying the Gayatri mantras and the Kama Gayatri. And prayers which are then said after Kama Gayatri. Yes, okay. So the next part is number 8 from chapter 8, a meditation on Krishna. And I will continue to read that, to try to read that the next time. Jai the Gayatri book, Jai His Holiness Sachinandana Swami, Jai His Divine Grace Abhayacharana Reverend Srila Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Vedic Wisdom Tales, the book Vedic Wisdom Tales. Jai, His Divine Grace, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakura Prabhupada. Jai Shri Prema Priyojana Prabhu Maharaj. Jai Shri Narayana Maharaj. Jai Shri Guru Govinda Maharaj. As you all know, this book is actually written from Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakura Prabhupada, the Diksha Guru of His Divine Grace Bhaichana Ravrinda Srila Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. So, and it is translated in English with explanations from Shri Prema Priyojana Prabhu Maharaj, and in this way, this book is actually from Shri Prema Priyojana Prabhu Maharaj, but it is written from the Vedic Wisdom Tales. They are from His Divine Grace Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakura Prabhupada, the Diksha Guru of His Divine Grace, Bhaichana Ravrinda Srila Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. The next story is Dhruva, chapter 14. Swayambhuva Manu Sam, king Uttanapada, had two wives, Suniti and Suruchi. Of the two, Suruchi was exceedingly dear to the king. Dhruva was born from the womb of Suniti. Once, King Uttanapada was affectionately holding Suruchi's son Uttama on his lap. Seeing this, Suniti's son Dhruva was also eager to sit on his father's lap. What to speak of taking Dhruva onto his lap, the king did not even look at him. Then Suruchi, with great arrogance, told Dhruva, "Although you are a prince, you are not worthy of sitting on the royal throne. If you desire to sit on the throne, first satisfy Bhagavan through austerities, obtain his blessings, and then take birth from my womb." Upon hearing such heartless words, Dhruva was deeply saddened and ran to his mother. Suniti was also distressed when she heard from others in the royal court how Suruchi had spoken to Dhruva. She said, "Son, it is because of being born from an unfortunate woman like me that you are in this state. If you have the ambition to sit on the royal throne, then you must satisfy Bhagavan, the Supreme Lord. Other than the mercy of Bhakta Vatsala, Bhagavan Shri Krishna, who is affectionate to his devotees, there is no other solution to your sorrow. Surrender to him and worship him." Hearing such essential advice from his mother, Dhruva became steadfast in his resolve to worship Sri Hari and set off to the forest. The great sage Sri Narada understood Dhruva's intention. Sri Narada appeared before him and said, "Vatsa, O child, faith is the cause of happiness and sorrow. One should remain content in all circumstances. It is extraordinarily difficult for you to please Bhagavan by following the path suggested by your mother. Even after thousands of years of austerities, sages have not obtained Bhagavan's mercy. Hearing the advice of Devashri Narada, Devarishi Narada, Dhruva asked, "O mother, O master, what path should be adopted to attain the highest position, which has never been attained by anyone until now? Kindly instruct me about this." Devarishi Narada said, "O child, all perfection lies only in serving Bhagavan. Therefore, go to the sacred bank of the Yamuna river in Madhuvan and worship Bhagavan Sri Hari by your body, mind and words." In this way, Sri Narada instructed Dhruva and initiated him with the supremely confidential 12-syllable mantra. Being satisfied with Dhruva's extended period of worship, Lord Sri Hari, who is kind to his devotees, appeared before him. When he blessed Dhruva with transcendental knowledge, Dhruva began to glorify the Lord with prayers. "O Bhagavan, whatever one desires, you grant him accordingly. Those who desire anything other than your service certainly remain deprived by illusory energy, Maya, because they continue to crave for temporary things. The enjoyment of such worldly pleasures is easily available even in hell, but the joy derived from meditation upon your lotus feet and listening to your glories from the mouths of your devotees is not even attainable in the bliss of Brahmananda. Therefore, even attaining the position of a demigod is also insignificant. O Ananta, unlimited Lord, may I attain the company of all those great pure-hearted souls who are incessantly devoted to you. In their association, I will listen to songs of your glories and effortlessly cross the terrible ocean of worldly existence." Pleased with Dhruva's prayers, the affectionate Lord said, "O virtuous one who strictly observed his vows, all auspiciousness to you. I know your desire. I am bestowing upon you that splendid position no one has attained until today. Dharma, Agni, Kashyapa, Indra, the forest-dwelling sages, and the Sapta Rishis continuously orbit this place. Vatsa, O child, your father, entrusting the burden of ruling the world to you, will retire to the forest. Taking shelter of religious principles, you will rule for 36,000 years without anxiety. Your co-mother, Suruchi, harbors animosity towards you, although you do not hold any grudge against her. I cannot tolerate any envy towards my devotees. As a result to her hostility towards you, her son Uttama will be destroyed when he goes hunting. Distraught from not seeing her son, Suruchi will search for him in the forest and perish in a forest fire. Throughout your reign, I will always remain in your memory as a result of your worship, and afterwards you will come to my abode. Saying this, the Lord disappeared. Although every desire of Dhruva was now fulfilled, his heart was not satisfied. He returned to his home, but his mind was not peaceful. Even after attaining the direct vision of the Lord, he could not pray for the eternal service to his lotus feet. This fact troubled him. Feeling repentant, Dhruva admonished himself, "Oh, how unfortunate I am! Although I was present before the lotus feet of Sri Hari, the destroyer of material existence, I desired only the perishable material things. Pleasing Bhagavan, who removes the cycle of birth and death, is extremely difficult through penance. Yet after pleasing him, I desired only temporary mundane things, exactly as a destitute person requests grains of rice from the emperor of the world. I am so unfortunate that I desired insignificant things from Sri Hari. He wanted to grant me the bliss of his service, Seva Ananta, but impelled by foolishness, I rashly desired the objects of pride. When King Uttanapada heard news of his son's return, he joyfully welcomed him. By associating with his saintly son, good intelligence awakened within him. After some time, he arranged the coronation of his son Dhruva as the crown prince and left to the forest to engage in Hari Bhajana. Both Dhruva and Prahlada have set the ideal of devotion to Lord Hari since childhood. However, there is one difference between their devotion. From the very beginning, Prahlada never worshipped Lord Hari to gain a kingdom or worldly prosperity. In contrast, Dhruva worshipped Bhagavan in the beginning with a desire to attain his father's kingdom. Because he was deeply hurt by his co-mother's harsh words, he also wanted to win his father's favor. When Nrsimhadeva invited Prahlada to ask for a boon, Prahlada said, "One who desires something in return for serving the Lord is not a servant but a merchant." Dhruva worshipped the Lord with the hope of gaining a kingdom. But when the lotus-eyed Lord Sri Hari asked him to request a boon, Dhruva said, "I engaged in penance with the desire to attain a kingdom, but I have attained your darshana, which is rarely attained even by the demigods, philosophers, and sages. I came here to search for pieces of broken glass, but I found a wish-fulfilling jewel, Chintamani. I do not desire anything else." From Dhruva's life history, we'll learn that making a show of serving God while internally intending to fulfill some type of worldly desire is not true service. However, Even when there is some other desire in the heart, it is also destroyed by the influence of sincere service to Bhagavan. Nevertheless, it is crucial to remember that service to the Lord is not attained by those who have other desires, anyabilas. However, by maintaining honesty, akapata, and attentiveness, unmukata, while serving, other desires go away and pure service is attained. The next chapter is chapter 15, Prithu, the ideal emperor. Jai, the book, the Vedic wisdom tales. Jai, the book, Vedic wisdom tales. Jai, His Divine Grace, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur Prabhupada. Jai, His Divine Grace, Abhay Charanarinda Srila Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. Jai, Shri Prabhupada Prabhu Maharaj, who have translated this book from Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur Prabhupada in English and given also explanations there. Jai Shri Narayana Maharaj, Jai Shri Guru Govinda Maharaj. Shri Krishna Gopala. O Shri Krishna Gopala, Hari, Mukunda, Govinda, O Nanda Kishore, Krishna. Alas, O beloved son of Yashoda, be pleased with me, O life of the gopis, O Lord of Radhika. Shri Krishna Gopala Hare Mukunda, Shri Krishna Gopala Hare Mukunda, Shri Krishna Gopala Hare Mukunda, You can play.